What is up, everybody, and welcome back to a relatively new series on the channel in which we talk about my 40k homebrew, and we're going to be starting the series off by talking about my personal Space Marine chapter, the High Slayer Guard. Now, before we get too far into this, I want to say I have a little bit of a cold, so if I'm sniffling or sneezing or anything like that, no, I'm not sneezing, I'll fucking cut that shit out, but if I'm sniffling a little bit, that's why. I hope that doesn't bother you too much. I'll try and cut parts where I'm doing that too much out, and I'll try and keep it to a minimum whenever I can. Now, I've already made one video on the High Slayer Guard, but it was just kind of a brief summary. It was very unscripted, not a very good video. This is going to be vaguely scripted. I've got some talking points here, and I'll talk about that, but before we really get into it, I want to give a little bit of context about the Guard, and that's that, one, they are a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. 2, they arose pretty shortly after the Horus Heresy, with their first chapter master having fought in the later Horus Heresy as an Imperial Fist, and they are non-codex compliant. We're going to start off talking about how, like, the paint and stuff like that on the armor is, and the trim. We'll start with the paint, though. So, the High Slayer Guard has entirely gray, unpainted ceramite armor. They have no bright colors on it, much like the Iron Hands or Iron Warriors, just pure gray armor. The way that they differentiate roles and company markings and squad markings is as such. On their left pauldron, they have their chapter emblem, which is a fist holding a skull, and it is purple and black. Then they have on the left knee, they have their company marking. On the right knee, that is where their squad marking is, and on the right pauldron, 100% of the time without fail, they always have molecular bonding studs. Always. That is kind of their thing. Now, aside from this paintwork, their trim and finish, I guess, whatever you want to call it, across their armor, is also just steel, ceramite, that gray. Unpainted, unchanged. Except for on the left pauldron, where it is made gold to kind of accentuate the chapter, so that it's easier to tell it's them, because you see the golden pauldron and shit. Aside from all the things that I've already said, which are essentially a given across every single member of the chapter, except for the 4th company, but we'll get there, is ranks. They have things that change. You have sergeants, which will have a yellow stripe along the top of the head going down just above, like, the eyebrows. That signifies a sergeant. Lieutenants have black helmets. They have these deep, dark black helmets. Aside from that, the other way to differentiate a lieutenant is they have a black right pauldron. The trim is still the same, but the actual pauldron itself is painted black. So, black helmet, black right pauldron, you know it's a lieutenant. Moving on from their paint scheme to talk about, like, the actual armor itself, a majority of the chapter is Primaris because of a specific battle we'll get into either next episode or the episode after that, we'll see. A majority of them are Primaris, though they have quite a few Firstborn. Now, even the Primaris do this. A majority of the chapter use Mark 7 helmets. The veterans and sergeants, lieutenants, captains, higher ranked, and veterans, they will wear Mark 8, because, especially if they're heavy, they wear Mark 8 because it just suits them better, especially when given a lot of the way that they fight being very up close, using either heavy weapons or thunder hammers and power swords and chain swords. They tend to fight a lot more up close, so they need more protection. They're not very stealthy or like ambushy. Now, some lieutenants choose to wear a crest or plume on their helmet. This isn't a standardized thing. It's just some lieutenants prefer to have it so that it's easier for them to stand out at a range if they have a multicolored or vibrant colored, or even just a black or white plume or crest. There's no standardized color for it or anything like that. It's entirely whatever they feel like. Now, some members of the Guard, in very specific circumstances, in specific Marines, will wear Corvus or Mark 7 helmets. Now, this comes from a mixture of both their beliefs and combat style. They are very defensive, and one of their main tactics, which arose from their earlier days, is essentially making a wall of Marines around a point, with all of them having shields and a melee weapon, whatever they have access to or whatever they're allowed to use, whatever their choice is with the higher ranked ones too. The Marine in the middle of the wall usually is adorned in cloth and robe over their armor, and they have a few extra purity seals, which is saying something considering what we'll get to later, and they'll have a Corvus helmet. And before this battle, if they know what's going to happen, of course, they are blessed with oils and seances and all these different things to clear their mind and ready them for combat. They're given this ritual, and they're seen as particularly holy, and they're set right at the front, right at the center of this wall, shield out, and they have this Corvus helmet, and they are the ones who are giving the order to most of the wall. And behind them, usually on an elevated position, because that just works better for this, is the rest of the guardsmen, sisters of battle, other members of the chapter, whatever, with ranged weapons, artillery, whatever, and they will fire over the wall into whatever the charging enemy is, while the wall is holding back the force. Now we're going to start getting into some aspects of their stuff that's more based on beliefs or things that are very specific to this chapter. Like, they typically are covered in purity seals. And to them, the purity seals represent promises, not accomplishments necessarily. And they adorn them all the time. Oaths, promises, whatever. And they're always putting on more whatever. But the interesting thing is if they fail on a promise or fail on an oath, they physically can't accomplish something anymore, whatever the case may be. They will burn the paper, not replace it, and then put a notch in their armor, a little scratch, under the wax seal as a way to remember. And it's not like a ritual of shame, it's just something to remember. It's something to know, to be better, essentially. And other members of the chapter don't look on them with shame, they don't look on it with shame. It's just a way to remember and know that they have to be better than they were. Now, moving on from that, which is a little bit more wholesome, which is a thing that I'm saying in reference to 40K, is the 4th Company, which is the Hollowed Marines. All the Hollowed Marines go there, and if you don't know what that is, I'll explain it another point, but basically think the Dornian Black Rage. So instead of them getting really angry, they just get really apathetic to a point where they lose their personality, they lose their mercy, not in a Black Rage way or anything like that, but they just have no regard for their life or other people's life. They feel no pain, and they are really, really bad at mitigating casualties on their own side because they just don't care so long as the objective gets completed. And they're really bad at guarding other people because they will break their bones, rip them out of the ground, rip their limbs off, keep them alive, but brutalized. Because it's more efficient to carry less of a person than a full person. It's easier to protect a little bit of a person that is going to live than a full person. So they're not the greatest at that. So the Hollowed Company, like the Death Company of the Blood Angels, typically are just thrown at death worlds or suicide missions or whatever. Because essentially they're already considered dead to the rest of their brothers, at least spiritually. Because again, they've lost their personality, everything. So their armor is swapped out and painted entirely orange and yellow. Their trim is black. Their eyes, instead of being lightless or bright white, which I forgot to mention earlier, but the rest of the Marines in their chapter have bright white or just no light in the eyes. Typically, they only turn on the lights when they're in dark environments or low visibility environments so that their allies can make them out and they can see better. But members of the 4th Company, their eyes are just red. Now, we've covered all the things about their armor that I can think of right now. I might circle back around to other stuff later, but let's move on to other equipment, like weapons and stuff like that. Now, around the year M41-300, their home planet of Halthed was invaded, and we're going to get into that a bit later, but the reason that a majority of the chapter was not there initially to help defend it was because they were on crusade, assisted by the Salamanders against the Necrons. And if you know anything about the Necrons, it's very hard to fight them because they shoot you once, you're fucking dead. Now, their solution to this was tech heresy, and it's not very well documented, but they found a way to temporarily forge shields using a little bit of living metal so that they'd be at least more resistant to Gauss flares. And they used this as a way to turn the tide, and they actually were winning. They were getting pretty harshly pushed at first, but eventually they decided, okay, we're just gonna bum rush them, shield out, and it worked. It actually managed to work, and they pushed them several planets back during their crusade, but then Halthed got invaded and they had to pull away. And because of the tech heresy, they had to essentially lock away the shields, get everyone who worked on them, all the best members of the salamanders, blacksmiths, all of them, to essentially shut their mouths and never talk about it, because the Inquisition would like to have a word if they knew. And at this point, the Inquisition was already using the chapter. Like, they were essentially holding it and blackmailing the chapter. They were holding it over their heads that they would make it known to every chapter and everyone across the Imperium. They would make their gene flaw known unless they gave over the 4th Company whenever they were asked for it, to essentially throw at whatever they wanted to not be there but didn't want any chance of being leaked or anyone to essentially live knowing of it, which worked great for them because they could throw the Hollowed at different like demons and stuff like that, and the Hollowed essentially don't have they don't have much of a soul left, essentially, so they can't really be possessed or anything, and they're strong because they have no reason to not put everything into every single swing because they don't get tired, they don't get sore, they don't feel pain. So they were a very great tool, and they have no personality, no ambitions or anything, so they're not gonna feel the need to do anything, and usually they just fucking die on missions after completing their objective, because then they just start swinging on everything that's hostile. So the Inquisition found them very useful. Moving back to the actual shields that the chapter was using during their crusade, the shields are now, as mentioned, locked away, and the living metal has since kind of corroded. It's not really the effectiveness it once was, and likely wouldn't function as good as a regular storm shield, but it's there as a relic because of what it meant, and as a symbol of the unity between the Salamanders and the High Slayer Guard. The High Slayer Guard actually impressed the Salamanders so much with their dedication to saving lives, minimalizing damage, and just kind of how respectful they were, that they gifted the best, like the most respected captains and the chapter master with special equipment, special helmets, special shields, special power swords, etc. as gifts and essentially symbols that they were greatly allied. Shut the fuck. The current chapter master, Pedro Alessio, actually uses a power greatsword that was forged by one of the Salamander's best blacksmiths, because he had a conversation with the chapter master of the Salamanders, who I'm blanking on his name, so I'm not gonna even try. I think it's Tuscan, whatever. And they got along very well, and to the point where Pedro actually invited him over to Brimeld, to their fortress monastery, and they dined together, essentially reaffirmed the relationship between the chapters, and if either of them needed anything, they would be there. And in response, he was gifted this power greatsword because Pedro Alessio, whilst he is definitely the most human member of the chapter, because the chapter has its things, which we will go into, where they're not as compassionate or human as the Salamanders, but we'll talk about that in another video. He is the most human, but at the same time, he isn't as good as some other like captains and lieutenants and other like veterans with bolters. He's not the most accurate, but he is lethal with any heavy weapon. Melee is his specialty, and he just outperforms everyone in the chapter, living or dead. All of them. Except for maybe dreadnoughts. They hit a little harder, but that's a whole nother thing. So, upon giving this fucking behemoth, who is almost 8'8", this massive power greatsword, it amplified how strong he was by a mile. And he very much appreciated it. Shut the fuck up! That is basically all the equipment I can think of right now, and everything that's on my dock that I have here with talking points. That's everything I can think of and all that, equipment-wise, for the chapter. If I can think of other stuff, I'll probably talk about it in a recap video where I break everything down or talk about things that I might have missed. But let me know what you think about this video. It's shorter than the other one, but my videos tend to do better when they're about this long. The only videos of mine that get any amount of attention when they're over even like 15 minutes long is Soulsborne, so this one's pushing it. But I'm really passionate about this. I like raiding. I'm not the best at it. I'm not even really that good at it, but I really like it. It's really fun for me, and I really like Warhammer. So this really, it makes me happy doing stuff like this, and I want to share that. I don't really care if this does well, but it'd be nice to. So, leave a like if you made it this far. consider subscribing. I don't really care about the subscribing, but it'd show me that, hey, maybe I should lean into this part more. I'm not gonna get rid of the other stuff because gaming. My girlfriend fucking hates it, but I play a lot of video games and I tell her all the lore. So subscribe if you want to torture her a little bit more. GV makes 4 alt accounts. Yeah, no. So that's about it. See ya.